Welcome to Surrender School.
Thanks, Cheryl. Well, hello, everyone. I'm calling from South Portland, Maine, where we're getting a snow shower, and it's almost April, and this is not supposed to be happening, but it is. And I'm rebelling by saying, go away. So we're going to talk about the five today. And before I jump into that, just invite you to consider learning about the types through movies that really depict them, that really capture the five-ish energy. So I'm going to have two movies on the slides that refer to this, but it's one of the best ways to just see a type in action, especially if they've been typed accurately. So the other thing I just want to say is that, learning to type, get your type, for some people is quick. It's easy. I read the type 4. I was horrified. It was me. Other people, sometimes type 3s, have a hard time typing themselves because they're so adaptable to the other types around them, and they can become the treasured type in a family as a part of their survival. So type 3s, I know type 3s who've gone through 6 iterations of what they thought their type was before they landed in type 3. And the same way with type 6s, because type 6s have, in a sense, sort of features of all the types. Whatever you can say about them, you can also say the opposite. They can be assertive and aggressive. They can be shy and retreating. They can be boisterous. They can be precise. They can be funny. They can be mean. And so, again, just encourage you, if you notice along the line that maybe you're not the type you are, is just to consider another type. But try not to let anyone strong arm you into their opinion of what that is, because it robs you of the work you need to do. So that said, my 43rd recovery anniversary is coming up this in a week and a half, which is the 30th of Sunday. I can send you the link if you'd like to join me on Zoom. That would be 5 o'clock in the morning your time, Cheryl, 8 o'clock my time. But the book I wrote was really an accumulation of many, many moments with men in recovery over the course of about 20 years, and really getting to observe and be really upfront and close with all the different types. And the thing that always stood out at me and really became more and more evident is that it's men's suffering and women's suffering that drive their less becoming behavior. And most of the time when people are in their reactivity, they don't really sense that underneath it is usually a heartbreak of some kind. Each of the types has gone through heartbreak as little ones, and certainly the defensive patterns of the type are useful for either numbing down, protecting, averting, feeling that heartbreak directly. But ultimately what we know is that a man and woman, as they recover, will eventually have to become unguarded enough to actually feel that initial wound of the basic fear. So in the Enneagram Institute story, we're always talking about that everything leads slowly but surely to feeling and embracing and really digesting that initial suffering so that a deeper level of presence will arise and support one. So you could say it's not a successful journey. It's not like, well, we're just going to feel better and better and better. Well, yes, you are. You will feel better as you relax your patterns, but it also opens the doorway for transforming deeper suffering. And then, so it's sort of a back and forth thing that goes on where I know for myself this last year, I've been feeling my basic fear more intensely than I felt it in any length of time. And the basic fear, around type 4 is I'm insignificant. I have no specific individual qualities. I'm sort of a nothing in space. And when that fear comes up, it's like it has a way of erasing everything I've done in my memory that is worth talking about or feeling accomplished about. It has a way of just sort of putting me back in the belly of that basic fear, which it's always good to have other healthy people around you, so that when you're unnerved and you're feeling that vulnerability, you realize you're in good company and people have gone through this before. But it's a powerful, going down into the basic fear. We go back and forth in it throughout our life, but as we're getting closer to really moving through it, well, we get it in spades. So it can be really challenging during that time, but it's all doable. And you just don't want to die on the roadside. Just keep showing up and things will be okay. So that said, I want to go to the slides on the 5. Let's see what we have here. And we start off with type 5, Toby Maguire, and then Kurt Cobain, to 5s. And so the 5 traditionally has been called the Investigator. I like the term the kind wizard. There's a kind of, wizardly knowledgeable way of being that some type 5s have, because they tend to be outside the cultural norm. And certainly 5s will say when they were little kids, they felt like they got the wrong planet. Type 4s will say, I think I got the wrong family. But 5s are a little more large scoped, which is I got the wrong planet or maybe even the wrong universe. There's this sense of feeling really different and outside the conventional way of being. And it's not the case with all 5s. Sometimes self-preservation 5s have more affinity with the culture, but Stephen King is a classic 5 who all of his books are like out there. There's nothing conventional about Stephen King's writing, and he's also a man who's been in recovery something like 25 years. So he's been in the belly of the beast and he knows about it. So then we have Mr. Einstein, and I think of him as the kind wizard. He is a really profound and deeply humanitarian guy, very sensitive to the suffering of others. Left Germany during the Nazi rising, and due to the violence that was going on there. And then there's a couple movies. The first one was Love and Mercy, and it's a great story about Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys, and it captures his life in 2 different phases. And Russ Hudson, a good friend and my teacher and colleague, said this movie really struck home for him in terms of understanding the insides of the type 5. And the other one is The Imitation Game, a really awesome movie about this type 5 who actually invented the first computer that saved the United States in World War II with Germany, that his wizardry created something that could pick up secret messages going back between people. But it's a great study on the quirkiness of the type 5. So I invite you to really take a look at those 2 movies. And so The Investigator, intense cerebral type. Sometimes when we talk about the type 4s, we talk about how they get really taken by intense emotional states. The type 5, as one of my friends said, my thoughts are intense. I don't have quiet, meandering thoughts. It's like they're electric in some ways. And then if you were to look inside my head center, it'd be like an electric storm of information and ideas going back and forth. I think of the movie Beautiful Mind about Dr. John Nash, and who went through, again, some really tough times as a 5, but just this, hardwiring of his intellectual center was really stunning to watch in the movie, partly when he was schizophrenic and partly when he was on the other side. But there's an intensity about their curiosity, wanting to get to the bottom of things, wanting to not leave any stone unturned. So intense, cerebral, caught up in their head center, very different than the 4 who's caught up in the emotionality of the heart center. So, question that's given me, how do I tell the difference between 4 and 5? Well, under stress, the 5 goes into their head. They analyze, they figure out, they withdraw, they shut down their emotional responses. They have a phobic sort of a phobic response to feeling. It's not their the go-to place. For the type 4, that's where they live, is in their feeling body, in their emotional center. And when they are under stress, it gets more intense there, more reactive, more powerful, more like a wave flowing through them. So they're two different heads, two different setters that operate when I'm triggered. So for the type 5, what I love about type 5s is that they have a natural curiosity regarding looking outside conventional wisdom and trying to see what goes deeper than conventional wisdom, what's outside of the box. Often 5s are really drawn towards developing their own niche, their own study. They have a love of knowledge and often known for love reading and collecting books and CDs and movies. My friend Russ Hudson just talks about, he has walls and walls of books and CDs, and that those really feel, he says, my books feel like my friends sometimes, they're just, I have a personal relationship with my information sources. So perceptive, we can say that 5s have the capacity to have almost like a laser-like perception to see beneath the surface of things. Innovative, creative, drawn towards creating new structures, new ways of thinking. And when they're healthy, if you want to watch and listen to a healthy 5, listen to Eckhart Tolle, who's incredibly adept at understanding presence and ego, and has, through his own studies, synthesized many different schools of transformation into very simple practices that anybody can get their hands on. And a profound teacher, profound understanding of the human condition. And he's also quite funny. He's got a kind of quirky sense of humor, likes to tell jokes about when we die and rot in the grave, how we get humble then, and that it's coming for all of us, and then he smirks and laughs. But he's worth, you can go on YouTube and watch him anytime. In particular, he discovered something called the pain body, which is basically his conversation is that we acquire certain patterns from our historical ancestral line that may not have anything to do with our current or our early historic experiences, that we pick up on ancestral suffering. And what goes hand in hand with that is this idea that as we heal ourselves, that healing, whatever that takes, does get passed on to our children. There's a way that, these sort of essence experiences of transforming suffering or being bottled up in it get transformed. So, and get transformed and transferred both backwards and forward. So that said, the type 5, quirky sense of humor, when they feel safe, they can be very kind, very gentle, very sensitive. They take information in, impressions on a very deep level, similar to the type 4, except they tend to take it through their head center. And they can often find themselves retreating into isolation because there's just too much stimulation coming through the perceptual channels. And so they'll just head to their isolation room. I've got one of my friends is a physicist, and he said, my favorite place is my isolation room. I go in that room by myself, and I make no one's around to bother me, and I can study in peace, and I can reflect on things, and I can tone down all the impressions that have been pouring through me. And in the book, you'll read a little bit about him, where he'll say in meetings, he's a social 5, so he's quite a gabber when it comes to telling stories. Similar to Russ Hudson, you just chat your ear off and on with great stories. But he will say in meetings, he'll say, I want you to know my first preference today is to be home reading a book. But I know that if I don't come here, I will start using again, and then I will start concocting new chemical combinations for hallucinogens and other sources of stimulation. So I'm here today, and my book must wait. So a sweet-hearted guy, a loving man, who would say that the essential quality when a type 5 is healthy, it's this quality of a still mind that's like illuminated, like a bright light that can see through the surface of things. There's a way that as a type 5, the way my head center works, that I come to these moments of illumination and understanding of things that seem to come out of my intuitive resources. So type 5s, when they're healthy, have a very strong intuitive capacity. If you ever have a chance to read a great biography, is about Einstein and how he came to many of his ideas, like going on walks or in the shower. All of a sudden, something would light up in his head center around the ideas that he'd been sort of wrestling with and collecting information. And then all of a sudden, boom, there'd be this perception that would just come through him, and he would see the whole pattern of what he'd been searching for. So, highly aware, I think that type 5, because are so sensitive, sometimes people don't understand what their quietness is a reflection of, which is often just their own way of trying to protect themselves from too much information. Um, it's like some fives will say, sometimes if people want to come and talk to me and it's not really about something I care about, I start to feel really drained very quickly. And my endurance for being around information or activities that aren't really attuned to what I love, it's like my energy sources just pour out of my feet and I get exhausted and I just got to get away. So all the withdrawn types have some version of that. We say that fives, what they tend to do is really try to protect their space from emotional intrusions. If you have a 5 in your life, it's probably not a good idea to barge into their office room or into their bedroom or just sort of jump them out of nowhere, because they have it's almost like an electric field around them. And when people sort of come in and even put their hands on them, sometimes 5s will just have this kind of shock response. So they're highly sensitive, and they do appreciate when people give them forewarning before they give them a hug or they even come in and start engaging them. So when I'm healthy as a 5, these qualities come online. And as a part of the work I go through on a spiritual path is retrieving what gets lost when I'm a little boy or little girl. And, all of us have to develop an ego to navigate our culture, our family, our schools. And we acquire certain personality responses to life that, in a sense, cover over our essence, the deeper quality of ourselves. And so, as we mature and become adults, we have the interesting task of learning how to relax that shield. 5s have one quality of shielding, a certain style, can be really contained around their ideas and beliefs and keeping you away with their superior intelligence. But nonetheless, anything that they've gone through that's really forced them to close their hearts down is also going to close down the capacity to feel and experience illumination. So everybody has an ego, and the job is, when we're ready, to start learning to relax it so our deeper qualities of well-being come through. But when this ego gets constructed as a little one, age by age 4 and 5, the basic fear is in place of having no ability to know what's true, to be lost in ignorance. It's this terror that somehow I'm going to be cut off from the truth. I'm going to be cut off from being able to ascertain what's true and false, because that's what protects me as a type 5. 5s are very sensitive to danger around them. So the secondary fear has something to do with losing confidence in my intelligence and feeling that my intelligence and other information I have are not enough to give me confidence and understanding. And for type 5s, I feel as safe as the knowledge I possess, which is why so often 5s are studying things deeply and acquiring and learning and filling up the library of their mind with all sorts of information sources. If you've if you've got a 5 in your life, what I'll do with my type 5 is I'll say something like, well, tell me something about quarks. You go, oh, quarks. Let me tell you about quarks. These are amazing, amazing attributes of reality. It can move from one point to another point, but have no trail in between. That's what a quark does. How do they do that? So if I bring up something that is sort of in their passion stream, they'll share it all. But if I'm, having a conversation about tennis shoes and whether Adidas are better than Nike, you'll see them sort of close down and drift off into the corner. It's like, this is going to drain my energy, my battery. So the one thing that 5s do not want to be forced to feel is a sense of being stupid. I have one dear friend as a part 5 who said, I research everything to the ultimate extent so that if we have a conversation, I know everything about the subject, and there's no way that you can touch that vulnerability in me around not having enough information or sufficient resources to understand something. So that, for a lot of 5s, that feeling of being stupid can really be an Achilles heel that they guard against, just like, all the types have a different way they do that. So my basic desire is to understand reality and to not be stupid. And understanding reality is a healthy desire. It's just that when it's fueled by a sense of feeling that I'm not loved or cared for, we say that type 5s are a rejection type. And rejection types feel rejected by their parents, by their environment. It's just like, again, a quality, an object relation quality that's close to their heart. There's a sense for type 5s. It's almost like when they were little kids, they had this sense that mom and dad really don't get me. So I'm kind of on my own. And if I'm on my own, that means I've got to cut down cut off from my own emotional needs for connection. And maybe what I'll do instead is I'll make friends with my computer and live in my computer for the next 20 years, which is what my son did as a type 5. So there's this strong need to understand reality and also to not be rejected by it, which is, again, what sets them up sometimes for being withdrawn types and retreating. That sense of I'm not wanted here, I'm the weird one, can be very close to the surface for type 5s. If they're healthy 5s, they'll tell you about it. I'd invite you to listen to the 2 interviews I did with Russ Hudson about a month ago, where he really goes into the depth of the type 5 and that just the whole inner sensitivity that they have. That's I think one of the best videos on understanding the 5. So my self-image, which is actually true when I'm healthy, is that I'm perceptive, I'm smart, I'm curious, unusual, objective, and insightful. And that's the gifts of the type 5, being objective, being able to look at a situation and come up with something that makes sense, that's based on good reasoning and thinking. And I think where the word objective comes in is like my emotions don't get caught up in what I'm analyzing. I'm not like a type 4 who tends to be subjective in what they analyze. But smart, curious, and when I'm unhealthy, I still do all these things. I just retreat from contact with you. So the investigator, we talk about the heart wound of the type 5. We call it avarice. Some 5s call it the dry heart. It's like, because as a little boy or a little girl, I had to really protect my heart and really put my attention up in my head center. My emotional body, my emotional being can be like a desert. Like I don't feel much there. That's a big one for the type 5, is learning to open up their heart to feeling. And for type 5s, as I start to feel things, it can feel like I'm going to die here if I really allow this vulnerability to come through. So that's a growth edge for the type 5. But avarice is a response to this fragileness I feel about my heart, which means I really try to keep enough isolation space from me for myself so I don't lose my energy by talking to too many people, and that I also don't drain myself by giving away too much information. So I have a tendency to really want to hold tight to my time. I'm not necessarily stingy overall. If you're really interested in something that I care about, excuse me for a second. What I've noticed about type fives, if you are really interested in their stories, sometimes you can't shut them up. They'll just share one story after another, and they'll just download what they love. But if they sense that you don't really care about it, they're not going to give you much. So the wake-up call, we call it withdrawing into the mind, which for the five means I'm going into my head center and I'm trying to figure everything out before I do anything. And one sort of classic example is I go to a dance and I watch everybody do their steps and I memorize the steps. And then just when I finally got it memorized, I'm ready to dance and the dance is over. And it's just sort of this sense that, I prepare and I prepare and prepare because I don't want to be stupid and I want to get it right. And that can stop me from actually engaging in some things that would really be good for me. So I get in the habit of collecting information, memorizing, storing stuff in my head center, because that makes me feel stronger. So the cynical, distant heart, the heartbreak for the type five, little boy, little girls, I can't trust reality. It's not attuned to me. So when I'm really triggered, I start to develop kind of a cynicism about life and about human beings, that they're ridiculous and stupid and don't have any heart or any rational capacity to think things through. For some reason, my voice is disappearing. So hopefully it will last a little bit longer. So I want to just take a break here and see how this is landing on people. People who have fives in your life. Does this ring any bells? What's happening out there?
All right, so we are open for questions. My husband is a five. I'm going to share real quick. So when he was a Marine overseas, all this. Anyway, he would go to parties and he would go to where the music was, and then he'd run the music. And this after we knew each other, it's the same thing. He would go to something and he'd be off in the corner, like playing, deciding what music to play and all that. And then someone would come over and say, how come you're not having any fun? And he was having a great time, but everybody thought he wasn't having fun because he wasn't in the middle of all that. And of course, I, being me, would say, well, why do you get mad at him? Why don't you just like go in the middle and dance with everybody? I never understood at all that right now. Eventually, I got to where that's what he does, and that's what he enjoys, and it doesn't piss him off anymore. But it used to really piss him off that everybody thought he wasn't having fun because his affect is also not bubbly. I'm thinking most fives aren't bubbly, right? Is that accurate?
It's not one of their, there's a few I've met, but most of them are not.
Not bubbly, yeah.
They can be entertaining speakers, but yeah, well, just as a side note, whenever, so every year there's an International Enneagram Association conference, and there's one coming up in July, and usually Russ Hudson is the DJ, and he DJs all the music because he has such a collection of songs on his playlist. But he's just up there by himself in his thing, doing his thing, and making people happy with music. And I think for some fives, it's like getting out into the crowd. It's like too many vibrations around me, and I won't be able to tell who's coming. And but anyway, that's his niche.
I want to say too, the thing you said about I always wondered about this. So my nieces will come and stay with us, and they hug me, and I hug them all the time. But both of them will always say to my husband, "Can I hug you?" before they hug him. And it's not like he's ever rejected them or anything, but it's like somehow they sense that. We jokingly used to call him a Russian spy because he's very private, right? Would never have his picture taken, all that stuff. We've been married 44 years, so we're kind of used to each other. But anyway, thank you for that. All right. Anybody else have a comment or a question or anything that you want to ask Michael at this stage of the game? If you have a five in your life that you want to talk about, please do.
I'd like to hear more about Michael's son being involved in the computer, because that seems where younger people are going today?
Well, it is quite attractive to a lot of people these days. We often say that the software revolution saved a lot of type fives and gave them a place in the world. If you go to, Seattle, Washington, which is has many tech offices there, or in California, different parts of California, the software kings and queens are type fives. They've got a niche. They can go into they can do their work. We say about type fives is they can stay focused on a deep level for long periods of time. And investigating and understanding the details of the insides of a computer seems to cheer them up quite a bit. And they tend to have a natural capacity for that. So that's a great thing. The growth edge for the five is, how do I get comfortable being with human beings and enjoying company with them? And depending on, suffering they've gone through as a little one, they may have more or less inner work to do before they really start to trust their hearts. And I remember, last month when I was talking to Russ, he said that his growth edge was becoming more heartful, feeling more on a deeper level. And that's a powerful movement for the type fives, because on some levels, type fives are sort of practical in a certain way, and they think, well, what good does it do to cry? Why share that emotion? It doesn't make rational sense. Well, if you have contact with your heart center, you know that it wakes something up, your emotional intelligence, your feeling of closeness with people. There's a lot there, but since that tends to be distant and less utilized by fives until they've done inner work, it's more like, why waste your time? You could retain a lot of energy if you weren't crying right now, or if you weren't shaking with fear. So again, it's just due to their center of their gravity is in their head center, and they're thinking and they're analyzing. In terms of my son, he often felt like an alien around people, like he just didn't quite fit in. And so what he would do is he'd just go into his computer and explore and get into trouble with people on the computer. But he had a very irreverent sense of humor that he would bring into his classroom from time to time. I remember when he was 15, he was in health education, and they were talking about sex. He's bored. He's probably read all the books ahead of time. So he says to his friend next to him, I had sex with my Barbie doll this morning. And the kid freaks out. Like, do you not really get what he's saying? And so he runs up to the teacher, and the teacher pulls my son up, says, you're going to the principal's office for saying this obscene thing. And he's just laughing all the way, saying, these people are so ridiculous. The most stupid things they get excited about. And when I went and met the principal, she said, him talking about this sounds like a form of domestic abuse. I said, domestic abuse? This kid's 15. He's probably talking about masturbation. She goes, oh God, don't say that word. And that ended the conversation. But there was this sort of, here we are in sex ed, and he's telling a kind of offbeat sex joke. That's what he does. He's a type 5. He invents something new. And he also likes to shock the norm. So that was like one of about 10 stories I have. I won't go into much more depth on that. So other questions popping up?
I have one. As a 4, I relate to a lot of this 5 stuff. Can you talk about for the 5 being a wing of the 4 a little bit, or
Well, tell me what you relate to.
everything? Pretty much. Like, it makes
Okay.
me wonder if I'm truly a 5, but I tested as a 4. But yeah, I'm much more cerebral than emotional.
Mhm.
And
Well, you might be a 5 with a 4 wing. I mean, that's really the discerning factor is, am I more cerebral or more emotional? And some people find that they feel that equally, so that it's hard to discern one or the other. But the question is, when I'm triggered and I'm going down the levels of health, do I become more emotional and reactionary, or do I become more withdrawn and secretive? That's where the 5 goes. Now, if you've got a 4 with a 5 wing, you can do a combination of that. But that sense of knowing what happens when I go down the levels of health. 4s are going to get more emotionally reactive, more caught in self-pity, and 5s are going to get more suspicious and more antagonistic with their ideas. So,
I mean,
go ahead.
is it possible that I've used the 5 to offset some of the emotion?
Well, I think you just observe and come to your own conclusions. That's what I would say.
Yeah. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Deborah. Lauren, to you.
Yeah, I just have a question, Michael, and I think you already answered it a little bit, and thanks for today again. So, you know, I suspect a possible 5 in my life, but of course I know I'm not technically allowed to do that. And but this idea of they're missing books, you know, they're missing a CD collection. They don't tend to collect much of anything really. So it was in listening to other 5 discussions where you know, their closeness and anyways, and I've thought I had a 5 wing. I don't think as much, but so is there always a collection? I mean,
Not always. No, it's just one of the, it's just like with the 4, sometimes people will say, well, type 4s, they all like to get tattoos. No, they don't. There's a good number of 4s and 5s that like tattoos. I'm not one of them. I'm not a tattoo person. But so, you know, it's just to notice that, and you know, a lot of 5s like to collect things. It might be, you know, a collection of insects when they're a little guy or a little girl. Or it could be a collection of anime movies. You know, type 5s are known for really getting into anime and collecting, and so it's different with each 5. But
So
there's no. Go ahead.
person that I am thinking of, this literally like has very little material. They don't collect anything really. So I don't know. I'm thinking perhaps not a 5. I've had them in the 9 realm before. I'm also a 4 without tattoos. Anyways, that's the last thing I had wanted to say.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. All right, Dave or Kim, to you.
Yeah, hi. This is helping me understand my dad so much because my dad passed away 3 years ago, and he was a Boeing engineer, and he was one of the first people I ever knew who owned a computer. It was a TI 99-4A, which was a very, very basic. It was really just a keyboard. You had to hook it up to a little TV to even be able to see anything with it. And he was always trying to get me interested in the things that he was so interested in. But I never wanted to dive as deep into the things that he did. And I would always feel like, could you just give me the Cliff's Notes version of whatever it is you're interested in? I don't really want to read this book or join your club but he would go so deep into things, and they were quirky things, like he played the bagpipes, you know, that's pretty unusual, and that was the way he would connect with people socially, is they were interested in the same things he was. Like when he got the computer, he joined this computer club, and then it was a multi-level marketing thing, and he was trying to get me interested in the multi-level marketing aspect of it because he knew I was a salesperson, and he wasn't really much of a salesperson. So I think he thought, well, I'll do the computer thing and then he can sell it and we'll both make money. But I never was that, you know, I dabble in it, but it was like, okay, this is an interesting thing, but I never go that deep into the things that he did. So, but it's interesting to me that his brother was also an engineer. It's like and it was funny because the conversations we'd have with them on the phone, somebody'd say, "Oh, I talked to your dad the other day," and he'd say, "Oh, what was what did he say?" And he said, "Yep, okay, yep, I get it." You know, it's like that was the conversation. And talking to him on the phone was like that, and talking to his brother on the phone was also like that. It was just so interesting to me. But I love hearing this because it just helps remind me of the things I loved about my dad and how we were so different. But, you know, I do have an arrow to a 5, and I will kind of retreat into, you know, if I do go into isolation, it's like studying things. And I don't do it very often, but I really know that I think I retreat into my 9 wing in a different way. But my 9 wing, I just check out and don't want to do anything. But when I'm going to the 5 arrow, it's like, well, let me read a little bit more about this or study a little bit more about this. So I'm really enjoying this, your teaching about this. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, one of my 5 friends, if you go to the interviews, there's some really, really interesting type 5 interviews. And one of them, Chris, said, you know, when I learn about something, I want to share the whole thing. So when I'm with my wife, I say to her, you want the Cliff Notes or you want the whole thing? She said, the Cliff Notes work great for me. Says, okay, because over time he just used to just drown her with, and she'd go, I'm drowning here. And so now they have an agreement. So he knows that he's not going to share his great discoveries. So I see you're smiling, Cheryl. Does this ring some bells for you?
Yeah, so my husband was putting speakers in the living room, and he'd gone online to like do all this research, and he said, okay, here's a video on so I'm like, okay, fine, I'll watch the video. So I watched the video, and at the end the guy says, but don't do it this way. And I looked at him and said, this is don't do it this way. He goes, oh yeah, there's 7 videos, and the last one he shows what you're supposed to do. And I'm like, this is torture. And he said to me, and when you talk about the Enneagram, it's torture for me.
That's funny.
So he jumped to the 7th, and I watched the 7th video. But anyway, thank you for asking that, Michael. All right, Richard or Becca. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think there's a 5 with us today. Lisa? I thought she put something in chat. I wanted to.
Oh, I think she did. Let me
Hello,
see. Where is she?
Michael.
I
Can
would
you
love
hear me?
to.
Yes.
Yes, I can't see you, but I hear you.
Oh, hi, Michael. Thank you again for a wonderful presentation. I don't know how I always get to be the only 5 in the room, you know.
Well,
I think we're afraid of it. But thank you.
Can you go on video so I can see you?
Yeah, hold on one second. I just need to move my location. Can you see me now?
Yes, yes.
Can you see me now, Michael? Hi.
Yeah, I can see you.
You know, I absolutely love the Enneagram, and I've been in recovery for quite a while now, for many, 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 many years. And when I first stumbled on to Surrender School, which, I don't know, maybe a year and a half ago or so, I'm not quite sure, it blew me away because it was a piece of the puzzle I didn't know about within my own recovery.
Yeah, and I'm losing your audio.
They have just.
But I still thank you for everything that you said, and
Well,
it's very spot on, and it's changed my recovery immensely. And I thank you, Michael.
yes,
Cheryl, I thank you too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Thank you, Lisa. All right. So we have Richard or Becca. I think it's probably Richard, and then Michelle, and then Jessamine. If we can do those 3, and then you'll go back to your PowerPoint. Okay. All right. Richard,
It actually turns out to be both of us. So,
okay.
But Becca's going to go first.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to hear a little bit more about type 4s who have a very strong 5. I almost feel like I have one foot in each world. And part of it, I think, as a type 4, you know, it's like a history of depression and suffering and getting kind of going down that spiral. It's like I learned not to trust my feelings because they're so erratic. So I use the intellect to analyze and escape and have more mastery of. So like when I was in undergrad, it was finding out that there's a lot of causes of depression, physiological, spiritual, emotional, that led me to my ultimate research, which was holistic health back in the 70s in Indiana when nobody even knew what that was.
Mhm.
And so it's like I use my intellect because I don't trust my feelings a lot of times.
Well, I think there's different ways to work with this. I'm a 4 with a 5 wing. And so the combination of it has made me deeply interested in psychology, the psychology of the human soul, the depths and details of the psyche, which are really, both 4 and 5 territories. So I think of there's a man named A.H. Almas, who's the Diamond Heart teacher, who's a type 5, who studies in detail all the manifestations of the soul and the personality, and really creating a map for people if they want to do deeper investigation of themselves. and he's it seems like he writes a 500-page book every year. He just has so much wisdom and knowledge. And so I think it's just noticing for myself when the 5 wing is operating in a less healthy way, I'm more inclined to get cynical about human beings and seeing the dark side of human beings and analyzing the dark side and just going into kind of a nihilism, which is different than the 4 when I'm going down the levels and I'm feeling a quality of despair or hopelessness or heartbrokenness. So it's just to notice, what's operating for me today. And there's no one way 4 and 5s, are. We call them, I think the term that Don Riso called 4 with a 5 is the bohemian, which again just means someone who's on the outside, who sees with a different set of eyes.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So, Michael, what I was going to say was when I first was introduced to Enneagram, which was, I don't know, around 8, 9 years ago, and I took the tests, I was type 5. Mm-hmm. And I remained that way until I took another series of Enneagram classes with Becca and her mom and her brother. And I discovered about tri-types as well, which I don't expect we're going to go into. So I definitely have, when you were describing the type 5, I saw so much of me in there. And I should show you my CD collection. And I used to have a huge movie collection as well. But if Catherine Fobb's notion about tri-type, that we have a strength, if you will, in each of the centers, has some validity. I think of myself as 1, 4, 5. I know there's a line from 1 to 4. And then, anyway, I just wanted to mention that I'm relating to a lot of what you're saying. At the same time, I know that type 1 really works for me as well.
Well, they're close cousins, the 1 and the 5. So, okay. Well, thank you. And Cheryl, you're muted.
I love it when I'm talking to myself. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Michael. Okay, Michelle, to you.
Oh, thank you. I will come on camera as well.
Awesome.
Hi there. Yeah.
Hi.
So, hi. I relate to that when you're talking about the comparison to the 4s and the 5s. I definitely have wondered because, well, I don't know, but I did take one of the tests on the website that got a little bit deeper, and it gave like the variance too. But so anyway, but I am just the 5. What you're saying about the 5, I feel like it's like really close. And the thing that is maybe standing out the most is that I I understand that as a 4, the 4 is the heart type or triad, and then the head. And so I'm always like literally, I feel like I like I have some of this stuff in my head, but then my heart overrides it. That's, I'm not saying it, I don't even know if I'm saying any of this right, but it's like I have a head knowledge. Like I was, okay, so I was doing some like, cognitive therapy, a little EMDR, and my therapist finally said, like, we're coming to the end of the road here, because it's like, the things, but like when something happens, you don't remember them. It's like you just, like, there's a disconnect between your head and anyway, so it's just like I feel like I'm always straddling that, like I'm suppressing feelings all the time, and I don't know if it's because I'm afraid of them or it's because I just don't know how to deal with them. But I have feelings and I'm very emotional, but I also can get so withdrawn and stuck in my head. And it's like, that's where where big trouble is. If I get stuck in the head and it unravels and it goes to shame. So I feel emotional and weird and like I don't fit. So I get when you said I'm not born to the right family. So I identify that as a 4, but I also don't think I'm on the right planet a lot of times. So I don't know. It's weird because it seems it seems like they're related, but there is a distinction, and I don't know if it even matters to like split hairs over it. Anyway.
Well, the challenge is to notice when I'm in the healthy zone of the 4, or when I'm getting caught up in the less healthy patterns and being awake enough to get support for, when I'm starting to go down the levels. It's the same way if I know the 5, see, 4 and 5 are both withdrawn types. So under stress, the 4-5 can just disconnect from people and really go into their own zone and spend too much time alone and in their head imagining or analyzing or just spinning around in this head center, because 4s have a strong imagination, and you combine it with the 5 wing and you can come up with all sorts of concoctions around what's happening and who to trust and what's safe and all of that. So I would just say read both types and then just become aware of when you're in a healthy place. What's that look like? And for all the types, becoming and able to develop quiet mind for all the types is really important, because it will give you more clarity around when you're not clear in your head center. And also learning to sense your body on a deep level is really important for being able to navigate the emotional waves of the 4. And all the types have to develop both of these tools, but the more you have those access to the gifts of the body and the head center, the more that you're able to notice, I'm going into the 5 zone, everything's nihilistic, I can't trust anybody, or I'm going into the 4 zone, I'm the outsider, nobody cares about me. And those are powerful patterns, but I think the more I begin to see them when they happen, they start to lose some of their power. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
So we should, Cheryl, we should go down the levels here a bit and hold off on another question. And you are talking to yourself again.
And I was unmuted and anyway. All right, Jasmine, is it okay if you, after this next section? Good? Okay. All right. So go ahead, Michael. You can start sharing again, and Jasmine will catch you on the other side.
Okay. Let's see here. So the path of growth for the type 5 is moving into a more felt sense of their aliveness in their body, beginning to feel that their real core of confidence comes through the body center and not the head center. So that means I have to learn how to inhabit the body through sensation, through sensing practices. And there's something about, for type 5s, because I tend to be I would say even conflict aversive is that part of the growth edge is I develop more confidence and I'm able to speak my truth. So the path of transformation, we also call the path of compassion and understanding, which means I start to, in a sense, bring some of my attention out of my head into my heart, where I can really feel my vulnerability. I can feel my need for love. I can feel my need for emotional connection. And that is a big doorway for the type 5. So if we're looking at the levels, we say that 5s can get addicted to indulging themselves in constant speculation and theorizing, living in your head, starting to sort of analyze and observe people as if they were objects under a microscope. So I have this way of distancing myself and being sort of outside of the experience, but I'm, watching it from a distance, and that helps me to feel a little bit safer. I can get addicted to collecting and filing information in my head center as a way for making up for not feeling strong in my body and in my belly center. It becomes, for type 5s under stress, they can go to 8 and be quite combative with information as a way of protecting themselves. And so as a type 5, if I get triggered and I'm going down the levels, the one thing I can assuredly do is remind you of how incredibly stupid you are. And a matter of fact, I'm going to do that right now, because that will get you out of my hair, right? But when I'm healthy as a 5, I'm inspired to expand people's curiosity and their curiosity about wisdom, about how things work. There's a way I'm, shining a bright light on possibility. I think Stephen Hawking did that, and a lot of the work he did. He was a type 5 who basically ended up just having really only access to his head, right? He had that terrible disease that atrophied everything in him. And so he set up this computer system where he could write books, and he wrote a ton of books trying to help people understand some of the deeper concepts of science. He wanted to give his information away. Well, that's what I do when I'm healthy as a 5. So I'm perceptive, I'm observant, I see details. And if I have a passion, I can get focused and really zone in on it for long periods of time. And I'm generous and want to inspire people with the same kind of curiosity I have. That's a healthy 5. So as I start to drop down the levels, I become what we might call conceptualizing. I start over preparing. I don't feel like I can sort of go out and share my material until I've looked at every last detail. And the challenge for this is that, if you're in a relationship with a 5, they may have like all the information that's needed to solve a problem, but in their own mind, they haven't collected all of it. So they withhold for too long, and then they finally come out with it. And you say, well, why didn't you say that a month ago? I mean, you had all the information. Why were you holding on to it? But I start to get caught up in not wanting to make a mistake about it. And then level 5, 6, and 7 are in yellow print. And I'll be darned if I can. So I have an alternative to this so that we don't get sidetracked by the, 5s don't turn yellow when they go down the levels. That's the first thing you need to know. And I'm going to bring up another slide, and we'll do these levels from another angle. So let's see what we have here. Oh, here we go. Okay. So level 1, call them the visionary, pioneering visionary. Level 2, perceptive observer. Level 3, focused innovator. So in level 1, open-minded, pioneering discoveries come to me. Visionary, seeing way beyond. It's like futuristic capacities for understanding what would work better. Level 2, still really healthy level. Mentally alert, curious with a searching intelligence. You observe everything with extraordinary perceptiveness and insight. And you're able to concentrate, do deep concentration on the areas that have your attention. And level 3, still healthy level. excited by knowledge, or innovative. And fives are highly independent. They like to do things alone. They don't want you messing with their theories, and they don't want your erring ways to interfere with their work. And at the healthy levels, they tend to achieve mastery in whatever subject interests them. Then when we go to level 4, 5, and 6, this is where I start to shut down from anxiety and fear. And we say 5, 6, and 7s are fear types in the thinking center. And 5s, the fear comes from this sense of mistrust that people don't really know what they're talking about. That their tendency to just sort of buy what other people say, it seems really scary to them. It's like, so there's this sense of, I got to be really careful who I trust because people don't do the kind of research that I do to understand things. So at level 4, I start conceptualizing and fine-tuning my theories. And this really is a part of just starting to withdraw from being connected with people. And I start to build models in my head and prepare and practice too much before I come forward with my info. I'm very intellectual. At level 5, I start to really shut my heart down. And level 5 for all the types is where we really shut down our centers. And for the type 5, it means I start to get preoccupied with my vision, whatever it is. It just starts to really, possess all of my attention in my head center. I can start getting fascinated by offbeat, esoteric subjects, even those involving dark and disturbing elements, and can really get detached from the practical world, kind of like a disembodied mind that's no longer, in a sense, using their ideas and testing them in real life. It's like I become more and more reclusive in my theories, and I start to believe them without doing what a healthy 5 does, which is to bring them out into the world and see if they have validity or not. So level 6 is where I get antagonistic. I start to feel like more and more like I'm an outsider. And so when I get antagonistic, I'm trying to disturb your illusionary sense of peace. Like I'm going to poke holes in whatever your perception is that makes you feel like I'm safe here and I don't need to worry. Because ultimately at level 6, type 5s are starting to feel a bit terrified about their safety and their capacity to take care of themselves. So I can become provocative and abrasive, cynical, antagonistic, and what we say at level 6, everybody is a pain in the neck at level 6, regardless of their type. They just do it in a different way. And 7, 8, and 9, we're going into mental illness and more delusion. Type 5s down the levels can really get into hallucinating. I had one type 5 I worked with for a number of years when he said when he came into recovery, he had a voice that had been in his head for 17 years to talk to him all day long while he tried to do his work in the software world. And he was successful, but the voice was there and he would have conversations and he couldn't get rid of it. But when he got sober, the voice disappeared. And so, people, we say that type 5s can go into schizophrenic breaks or, more kind of horrified, delirious inner worlds, distortions, and phobias as they go down the levels. That's particular to the type 5. So let's cut back over here and see.
Anybody else have questions or comments? So I'm going to tell another Nick story.
All right.
So he's one of these. If I'm going to buy anything, I say, hey, I'm thinking of buying this, and then he just goes and researches it. It's a good deal. I have a researcher in my family, so so he was looking for a car, and he knew exactly. He had a good idea of what car. So he just researched, and then he found the car. We live in Las Vegas. It was in Miami. It was exactly the car he wanted, and he had researched for months. So he came to me and said, "Look, I found the car." And I said, you have 2 choices. Buy that car or shut up about the car, right? Because so our history has been he researches and I force him to buy or shut up about whatever it is. He usually buys. So I'm like the buyer, he's the shopper. So it works for us, But anyway, yeah, he knows so much. So it's a good thing. All right, other people?
Got any more questions or it looks like we're... Good to go. Thoughts, observations of fives in your life?
So I have a couple of questions of the group. Do all of you have a 5 in your life do you feel like you have a 5 in your life? Maybe?
Yes.
No? Yeah. So yeah, they're interesting, I think.
Yes, I have a question about how do you stop the collections because they are such great collectors.
Ah,
Well, one of my friends in Taiwan said what he had to do is he had to build another room in the house so he could put all his collections there. So that's one option. Just build an extra room.
there you go. Okay, so Shirley, I see
Fiona.
I see Shirley has her hand up and Fiona has her hand up. All right.
Oh.
So go ahead, Shirley. And then Fiona.
Yeah, I have a 5 in my life, and I often will walk around the loop in our local park, and I feel like I'm being interviewed, for how much information do I have about whatever topic it is,
Yeah.
So I find it interesting that I've come to appreciate the different types now that I'm learning more about the Enneagram. So thank you for your share today, Dr. Naylor, and Cheryl for the backup, and anyone else who did service. Yeah, I find it pretty fascinating. She's willing to go on. I'm a 2, so it's like a polar opposite for me. And she'll go on vacations by herself, and I'm like, I don't like being by myself for an hour. And it's just interesting to just see how different people are. And but whenever I have an ailment or an ache, she's a nurse, a former nurse. So she's just an encyclopedia of information. She knows so much about so many topics. And yeah, I found it interesting that we're talking about the 5 and the 4 wing so much, and we haven't touched so much upon the 6 wing and a 5. And I'm a little curious about that too. I just want to say one last thing is about 5s, that I think of them as very self-contained and quiet. And they're the type that can go off and read books. Like I can't read a chapter. I mean, it's very hard. It's very hard for me as a 2 to read, but 5s are like devouring books, and it's just fascinating to me. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley. Fiona, go ahead.
Yeah. Can I be heard now?
Yes. You just muted yourself again. So there you go. You're unmuted.
Yeah.
There you are.
Oh, hold on.
Somehow.
I'm going to ask you to unmute, and maybe that'll help you. There you go. You just muted yourself again.
Right. I can't see anything set a blank screen, but as long as you can see, I suppose that's the main thing.
Well, we can hear. That's the main thing. So go ahead.
Yeah. Just I think I'm a 4 with a strong wing 5, and I'll be reading things like Jung, the collective unconscious, and sometimes I'm reading it, I'm thinking, somebody joked with me saying, if you want to go mad, read that, because it's just like heavy stuff. And yeah, right. But when you mentioned the unhealth, I'm actually a carer. I look after my 95-year-old mum, who's got Alzheimer's, and I've had very background in my life, OCD, but it's been there since a child, contamination. But since looking after my mum last 4 years, it's become like more difficult, very difficult, and I've had help and stuff. you know, so it's a daily thing. I have to, another challenge I have, as well as being an addict and all the rest, but in recovery. But I was going to say, do you know when you said phobias? I was just thinking, does OCD come under the phobia that you mentioned?
Well, it can, I think that there's a lot of types that can experience phobias, but fives tend to have a higher, maybe down the levels, or just because of their imagination to really, generate fear about things. And, if you think about what Stephen King writes books to help people have more phobias, right? It's like the idea of Stephen King is like at any moment that fork could come alive and just stab you. I mean, that's the kind of, dialogue he has. Anything that exists could kill you at any moment. That's a deep phobia pattern of the type 5. Put in, he's made a living with science fiction, coming up with these kind of creepy things that human beings do to each other. I think.
Listen, come here.
I think the only book where the Green Mile is a great book and a great movie that kind of captures, in some ways, kind of the imagination of the 5. And if you remember seeing it, there was the prisoner, that huge, what was his name? The black man who sucked the illness out of Tom Hanks's wife. And then there was, these quirky things like, the mouse that was a friend of one of the other jail guys, and all the different things that he did. Mr. Jinx, I think it was called. But there was more humanity in that than most of his books, and the same way with what was the other one? Shawshank Redemption. Really, he didn't rely on weirdness, but 97% of what he writes has this flavor of, your eye could pop out at any moment and then jump down your throat, and then what are you going to do, right? Well, don't swallow. I mean, it's just that kind of madness. So he writes about mad worlds in a lot of ways, and likes to write books that terrify people. That's a type 6 going down the levels. He's just healthy enough to create stories, and he's a great writer.
Yeah, like Pennywise, is it? Was it about the terrifying clown and things like that? Yeah,
the clown in it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Fiona. Liz, to you.
Yes. So I'm a 4, and I am in that batch of 4s who are wondering, am I a 5? So why do I say that? Yeah, I relate to that kind of psychosis when I was a child, which I had to solve by myself. Of getting refuge in books, devouring books, and studying a subject that interests me, and I can, oh yes, this iPad is wow, I gonna research something that interests me. As a dilettante, I don't want to study, but I want to acquire, and I want to be informed. It's a very strong identification to a lot of things you said. And there was also, if I have to buy something, I will research it to death. I wanna, and but I know I'm not a 5. Like, I don't know. I know, like, I don't have their genius. I don't have their intelligence. I don't see it. I don't have their quirkiness. But being self-contained, I was like seeing me, even though it's a turmoil inside. And if someone talks about something that interests me, it's like, oh, I feel that drain. So it's interesting how, but I still identify as a 4. But I was amazed how that was resonating so much with me, the what you said about the 5. A lot of it.
Yeah. So, just part of the work is just to notice when the 5-ness is operating or when the 4-ness is operating, and where does my center of gravity tend to be on a daily basis. And it can vary depending on what's going on around me. But, you have access to the 5 qualities, and that's a part of, your makeup. And I think it's maybe not even so much a matter of saying, well, I'm a 4 or no, I'm a 5, but just noticing what happens as I observe myself in the course of a week. Does 4-ishness come out more often than 5-ishness? And they're both going to come out because you have a relationship with that wing, and it's just to notice. Ultimately, 4s have a tendency for feeling really deeply hurt, and abandoned. 5s have a way of sort of closing that off and saying, I abandon you in advance, so have a nice day. I'm going to go take care of myself. I'm not going to suffer grief over this. May you rot in hell, have a bad day, but I'm going to go study the books. But the 4, when they get hurt, it's like they can become reactive. They can feel destroyed, feel like the universe doesn't care about me. The 5 goes, the universe doesn't care about me anyway, so I'm going to just take care of myself and my interests because no one's coming to save me. Whereas the 4 has sometimes a need to be saved. So just, again, these are just different qualities. And what you can do, if you want to study more these differences in types, if you go to the Enneagram Institute's website, they'll have essays on the 4, they call it misidentifications. And there's a conversation about this is what a 4 does, this is what a 5 does. And you just go there, it's free, the information's free, and you can do your own study on how that operates for you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Liz. Kim or Dave?
Hi, it's actually Kim this time. I'm a 6 with a 5 wing, and we were laughing because they talk about collecting books and voracious readers. Well, I like to collect the books, but I never read them.
That's interesting.
Yeah, or I'll read parts of them, and then something else comes along that's more interesting, and I start reading that book, and the other book, I forget about. And yeah, and sometimes I'll go up in my head, and I'll just be so in my head I just become confused, and then nothing happens.
Well, if you're a 6, you already have a busy head center that thinks a lot. So if you combine it with the 5, that kind of magnifies it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and there's 2 6 with the 7 wings. We usually call the friend. This is like Tom Hanks, Ellen DeGeneres, and 6 with the 5 wing is often called the defender. And this would be like from the movie Imitation Game, where he is a serious researcher and trying to find out, what's going to, create this computer and save the world. So there's just a 6 with 5 wings tends to be a little more assertive around issues of justice or fairness, and 6 with a 7 tends to be more playful and lighthearted. So just might want to notice what's true for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And
thank you, Kim. Michael, Teresa, to you.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Michael. Nice to meet you on here. I have a question. I have a 5. 5, right? My brother-in-law, I was just talking about him this morning meeting. I try not to ask him about something if I'm buying something, because once I ask him something, I could literally be on the phone with him for 4 hours.
Yeah, I've heard stories like this. Yeah.
My gosh. So now I'm learning, I just try to keep it simple, but he is on his computer at least 6-7 hours a day, but he said he's doing good. He's only on 4 hours now researching. But yeah, and then the gloom and doom, you know, and I'll try to say something positive, but it doesn't, you know, he's just, the world's terrible. This is terrible. I hate this. So I'm learning to keep my conversation with him very light, because no matter what I think, you know, he's going to say, well, no, and he'll go online and he'll tell me 100 things wrong with that thing. But yeah, it could be a 3-4 hour call. So I try not to call that. I mean, he's very intelligent. Yeah.
I missed that last thing you said.
Oh no, he's really smart, but
Yeah.
he's overly smart, you know, that there's nobody else that can do a job better than him. So he won't work because his work, nobody appreciates the quality of his work.
Yeah.
You know, but that's how he is. So
Yeah.
being a 2, how do you, how do
You
you,
have to do, you just say, I gotta go now, and hang up. That's what I do. I gotta go now. Bye. And I get used to it.
yeah.
Okay, it is the top of the hour, so I'm going to stop recording. Everybody hang out if you would like to. Let's go ahead and say the surrender prayer or the serenity prayer together and end that part of the course. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. All right, I'm going to stop recording.
Thanks for recovering with us.